As the closing bell sounds on Wall Street, the financial markets continue to bleed. The situation is going from bad to worse, illustrated by an International Monetary Fund report stating that this is all part of the global economy in decline. The financial frenzy continued around the world on Wednesday with a coordinated cut in interest rates by 6 national banks, including the US Federal Reserve and the banks of England, China and Sweden. Well, the economy of Iceland has been in a major freefall, with its government taking over the national bank and introducing emergency laws to prevent national bankruptcy. While the world markets are reacting to America's financial woes, the effect is filtering down to individuals. US financial turmoil has wiped out an estimated $2 trillion in retirement savings assets, and more than 500,000 Americans have lost their jobs this year. Retail sales are down, and changes in quality of lifestyle are expected across incomes. Well, we took our cameras onto the streets to ask people here in the US about their concerns with the current economic situation.
My concern about economy is just I hope so the currency will go a little bit higher, because I'm from Europe and it's a big difference. But I have a good belief it's going to get better. Hopefully the president will make a big difference and the economy will get stronger.
I don't understand why they bailing out the big money boys when the average Joe is about to lose his job in his house. Shouldn't they be more concerned with the little people?
Well, on today's show, we look at how the woes of Wall Street are causing fear on Main Street. As always, we want to hear from you on the show. Well, I'm joined by 2 people who can give us a broad perspective on the financial crisis. From New York, we have Robert Engle, a professor at New York University's Stern School of Business. He was the winner of the 2003 Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences. His new book, Anticipating Correlations, will be published in the first quarter of 2009. And here with me in the studio is Avis Jones-DeWeever, Director of the Research, Public Policy and Information Center for African American Women, a think tank based at the National Council of Negro Women in Washington, D.C. I welcome both of you to the show. And Professor Engle, a nice easy question to start with, I guess. Are we in for an even worse slump in the world financial crisis?
Well, this is a crisis which has engulfed the financial sector in the U.S. and now in the rest of the world, and is spreading to the rest of the economy. The economy actually has held up surprisingly well in the face of this thus far, but I think that the last couple of weeks have suggested that this is really going to spread and that these credit crises are going to affect everybody top to bottom. So I'm afraid we're in for some tough times.
Professor, how do you regard the recent bailout packages that seem to be popular with governments right now, and who are they really helping?
Well, I think that they're helping the economy as a whole. The government wouldn't do it just to bail out a few individuals or a few sectors of the economy. The global economy cannot survive without an efficiently operating banking sector. And while it may seem like it's bailing out some rich individuals, most of those individuals have already lost pretty much everything they have to lose. So I think it's not bailing. I think it's a misinterpretation to think that it's bailing out the wealthy. Okay. It's really bailing out the economy.
Of course, let me bring in here Dr. Avis Jones-DeWeever, and of course a lot of people are very skeptical, and we hear a lot of people very upset at the way Wall Street's fat cats get such big payoffs. I wonder, from what you've seen, how is the average American being hurt by this? Where is the financial pinch being felt?
They've been feeling this pinch for years. It's just intensified recently. But actually wages have been stagnant here for white Americans since 2000. It's actually gone down in terms of its real value for African Americans and for Latinos since 2000. So people have been hurting for quite a bit. But right now, in terms of this housing bubble and the implications from that, some 5 million people around the nation are either in foreclosure at some stage right now or behind in their mortgages. People are hurting, and they're hurting all across the nation.
Now, who's being hurt the most? I mean, which sector? You mentioned the downturn in salaries for African Americans, but is there a particular sector you see as being most hurt right at this moment?
Well, actually, you know, it's pretty much everyone feels the pain in some way or another. Women especially have been taken aback, particularly with regards to this foreclosure crisis. People of color, for example, have been specifically targeted, it seems, by predatory lenders in terms of the subprime prices. So those groups especially have been hurting as a result. Just this past week, we heard of a 90-year-old woman in Ohio who tried to commit suicide in her house that she was about to get evicted from. These are tragedies that we're seeing all across the nation.
Professor Engle, for the longest time, the financial world, the business world, the political world especially, have tried to keep up confidence, and of course they've for the longest time talked about an economic downturn rather than a full-blown recession and so on. At what point do we have to face reality, and when it comes down to it, what are the real terms we should be using now? Because there's a lot of scaremongering out there that is, of course, affecting confidence.
Well, confidence is one of the key features of this crisis we're in, because when firms are going bankrupt every day and you don't know who is going to be the survivor in 2 weeks, you don't really want to lend anybody any money. You don't want to do a deal with somebody that's not going to be there. So the lack of confidence is actually contributing very importantly to this this downturn. And I think it's really one of the reasons why the government is structuring the governments all over the world are structuring proposals to try to build this confidence back up again.
And of course, Professor, the sums being talked about here are a shock to the average member of the public. The $700 billion bailout that went through was a phenomenal proportion. Of course, it was put into perspective with how much was spent on Iraq being about the same. But I wonder, when you look at these sums, are these the right kind of amounts that are needed? Because they don't seem to have made a dent, according to a lot of people.
It isn't clear that this is going to solve the problem, but I do think that perhaps we should be not quite so scared by the size of the money, because what this bailout money is designed to do is to buy assets from banks. So in fact, it's not the same as spending the $700 billion. It's buying assets which, if the government does it wisely, will actually appreciate in value if we avoid this this systemic risk that we're concerned about.
I'm bringing Dr. Jones-DeWeever here and put an email to you that came in from Jessica in New Jersey in the USA. And of course, a lot of people are putting their hopes on who's going to be in the White House next to solve a lot of the problems. They've got a huge burden on their shoulders, obviously. Jessica wrote in saying, Obama has no sound plan to rescue the economy, but ironically his plan to become the next president appears to have been rescued by the economy. Do I see your panel nodding in agreement?
Well, you know, this is a very difficult situation that we're in right now, an unprecedented crisis in terms of this mortgage issue, which is really at the root of this. When you talk about the $700 billion plan, to me the real tragedy of it is that it doesn't go directly to making sure that people can stay into their homes. While we're going and helping banks with their securities, we're not letting individual families secure their futures by holding onto their homes. And even though both Barack and McCain have come out with separate statements with regards to what they could do to help people stay in their homes, we aren't moving today to do that. And every day that we delay, that means another family is pushed out into the streets.
We have a call from Portugal, and Pedro's on the line. Pedro, what would you like to ask?
I want to give my opinion about this financial crisis. I have a conviction,
Yes.
and that is all the loans of the financial and the securities and the mortgage since January 2002 until today, 50% disappear. So this for me is the big issue and the big problem. So I want to listen to your opinions about this, my conviction, because all the injections of the money, they disappear the money.
Okay.
The banks don't give the money to other banks.
Okay, let's get Professor Engle on this. The idea that the markets could be able to take care of themselves, Professor.
Well, I think it's possible that the market can take care of itself, but so far it hasn't been doing a very good job. I am not. I think that when we look at the Lehman bankruptcy a couple of weeks ago, that was the government's experiment whether the market could take care of itself, and I think actually that was the beginning of a lot more turmoil. So there is a lot of concern that the market actually is in a free fall, that it can't take care of itself.
Okay. Dr. Jones-DeWeever, we had an email that came from Malaysia, and Nora wrote in saying, a bailout plan that's been sold to Americans as a desperately needed measure to restore confidence in the market has done exactly the opposite and destroyed whatever little confidence that there was. I'm afraid the winter of your discontent has just begun.
I think she's exactly right, unfortunately. People are panicking. They're really concerned when they see their retirement savings plummet. They're seeing those savings that they set aside to put their children through college disappear practically overnight. And so people are very concerned. And like your email person, your emailer just mentioned, I don't think we're near the end of this rabbit hole. That particular $700 billion figure, Secretary Paulson did not arrive at that from some sort of quantitative measure that he derived himself. He at least admits that that's a number he pulled out of the air. So that is probably not enough in the end.
Now, as we go to break, I'm going to get a question that we had. We can deal with it after the break. A question that we had from a person on the street. We put our cameras to, who talked about the future for young professionals, and this is what our viewer had a concern about.
What's going to happen to young professionals like myself in your early 30s, late 20s, making a good salary in New York or Washington, D.C.? Is that going to continue, or who's going to get hit the most in the next 5 to 6 months as the credit market crisis goes under?